Well, welcome. And I just want to invite you all to ask questions if you have them. I'm just going to give a brief overview of myself. I'm a mom of 3. I have one that's almost 26 who's getting married, so I'll venture off into being a mother-in-law. That's a whole other talk. And but it's all good. And then he is going into law enforcement, so he's looking for a job for law enforcement. And I have a son that is 20, and he is going to school for business at St. Cloud Tech. And then I have a daughter that is 18, almost 19, that's in school for teaching and sign language interpretation. So all 3 children are grown. I made it through the high school years. Hooray. So they're tough. I will say that just because they're out of high school, though, you're not like out of the woods. Young adults are the whole next bracket. So I've been director at Birthline for a little over a year now. I was interim last year for a number of months. We had a small stint of another person in there, and then they decided that they were my interim, and so he got another job and went. But previously to being director, I have a lot of experience with doing teen and young adult ministry just at our church and whatnot, and counseling. And at Birthline, I was their outreach and education director. So my job was to go out and talk to parents, but also mostly in the schools, and talk about their choices, specifically when it comes to relationships and sexual risk avoidance and some other risky behaviors. So I've talked to a lot of teens. I've been out there and I've shared a lot of information, but with that, we ended up venturing off, and when I was doing teen counseling, what we found is there was a lot more need for young adults to have relationship coaching and education, because a lot of times I would go speak and I would give our high school presentation, and then the young adults would be the ones vigorously taking notes. And so what I've learned is that they're the ones that are really, really hungry for this information. And so what's out there that talks to them about what's dating and love and all that stuff is very skewed. And if you've done any kind of research online, you know that it can be very skewed. It can be from one extreme to the other. And so I think us as parents, it can be really hard to try to navigate through. And how do you talk to your kids about this? How do you keep up? That's my big thing. How do you keep up? My daughter, who is, the one that's going to be a teacher, as girls, they're a lot more communicative. And so they want to talk and connect a lot more than maybe necessarily a boy. But with a boy, they have other drivers that they want to learn about. And so the internet is teaching our kids everything they need to know about dating and sex, essentially. So we got to be very careful as parents in how we're navigating through this, because more things are caught than taught. And so I know that we can be people who are in our home doing the best we can, trying to learn everything we can and put the parameters around them. But we also know that they're going to leave our house and they can go to the nearest coffee shop and they can have Wi-Fi or get on their friends' Wi-Fis, and they may not have the passwords on that stuff. So we have to be very, very careful. So I just want to back up a little bit here. In my time of being an outreach and education director, and I did relationship coaching at Birthline, there was several times I had parents calling and they didn't know what to do, because one thing that we do is we do life coaching, and that doesn't have to be relationship based, but we did the relationship education and relationship coaching. So a lot of times I would meet specifically with people one-on-one, but we would have parents that would call or come in, and I also would fill in. I was a backup client advocate, so I would see the clients as they would come. And I would have either parents calling and talking to me about, hey, my child's online, they're talking to people I don't know, what do I do? That's been very, very serious at times, where they were so close to being sex trafficked, it isn't even funny, and I've walked through some really, really scary and extreme circumstances that way. To a girl coming in, she's pregnant because she met somebody on an app, and they hooked up. So I don't know if you guys have heard the terminology hooked up, but that terminology doesn't mean that you hooked up a trailer. It means that they, were physically together in a physically intimate way. So you need to, keep up with the trends and the times, and, now the new thing, which is not even that new anymore, is, everything's lit. And so when I heard that, I was like, excuse me? And I was kind of freaking out. And then they were like, oh, it doesn't mean going out and getting intoxicated. It means just having a good time. But it didn't take long till that, became something else too. Or you'll hear people say, let's have Netflix and chill. There's lots of different terminology. The kids are taking on new terminology to be able to talk and do that kind of thing. So I just want to encourage you that you're all here, and so I'm believing that each and every single one of you are paying attention the best you can. And I want you to just know that everything we do with technology, our kids are watching and then some. And my kids would be the first one to tell you, yeah, Mom, so get off your phone when you're doing this, and that, and I'm like, yeah, it starts here. It really, really does. And so one of the first things I want to hand out to you is this resource thing. And, we're talking about teens and technology and dating. And if you haven't thought about what the dating rules are in your house, I would strongly encourage you to start thinking of those, of what's okay and what's not okay. It's way easier to start setting these boundaries and having these conversations the younger they are, and to start making it a norm. But if you are somebody who has older children, even if it was my children in my home at this age, it is not too late to start setting these boundaries. And I just want to encourage you to set these boundaries, because at any point we could be sitting in a place where our kids are making really risky decisions and having risk behaviors, and it's up to us when we're going to say as a parent when to stop. And if we do not say stop, then the law is going to end up telling them to stop. And a lot of times what's common too amongst what young adults, when they come in, is they'll be upset because somehow, some way, somebody got a picture of them. And I've even had kids that were in their own home, in their own privacy, and somebody flipped a picture, and the next thing I know, it's getting sent around. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term sexting, but it is something that's very, very serious, and a lot of schools take this very seriously, and they can be prosecuted as a, child assault, or not, child pornography. And so it's very, very difficult, especially when you have your own children and your children are not involved in that, and then it can come across their phone, and then now they're liable. Does that make sense? So I just want to talk about a couple different things. Some of the resources that I'm using, that I've got some printouts here, is from Common Sense Media and Teen Safe. And so I'm not advocating them, but I will tell you that when you start doing research on any of this stuff, they're the two that are going to pop up. The other thing I want to say is the St. Cloud Sexual Assault Center is an amazing resource for us in this community. They're one of the top-notch people that are involved in educating, and they're an amazing resource. When I have any kind of kid that comes in that is dealing with this kind of thing, I'm calling them in. They do trainings, they're out there speaking, and it's an amazing resource. So, and then of course Birthline. So one thing to just know with Birthline is, with the life coaching and with the relationship coaching, whether you're a parent or if you know a young adult or a teen that needs somebody to talk to, we have those services there. A lot of times when people think of Birthline, they think of just an unplanned pregnancy and them coming there. But we also have a preventative arm, and it's our job to make sure that people are educated so they don't ever end up in that situation. So we like to make sure that we're proactive and not just reactive. So as you can see, if you look at the rest of this and to the back, these are some of the top apps that are being talked about, okay? So this is a little cheat sheet for you on things to watch out for with your kids, okay? Now, here's the deal. I'm a mom that, if I haven't thought about it or my kids haven't thought about it, somebody's talking about it. And one thing that I know to be true is that our kids, they can come home and delete those apps off their phone, and then you're going to look at it and be like, it's fine, Mom, don't got anything. I have nothing to hide. I would strongly encourage you to have all the passwords, all of them, and I wouldn't even give them the phone. And if they bought their phone, I don't care. They're in my house and it's still under my name. You will see lots of information out there on privacy. I teach that privacy is a privilege. These are our kids. And I think about, this one video that I saw after this last shooting, and this one guy was talking about, I don't want to talk about hurt feelings or people be offended. These are my kids. These are their lives. And when it comes to online, these are our kids and these are our lives. And we really need to get back to being a village and helping each other raise our kids, because otherwise, if we don't support each other, I know too many people that are too scared to say things, and if it wasn't for those parents that said stuff about my kids, I would never have been able to intervene. So please have an open heart when people are talking to you. The very top one, well, actually the top two, I'm going to tell you at Birthline are the top two apps that people will meet when they come in and they're faced with an unplanned pregnancy or in a situation. One thing you need to understand about Kick is that you can access the internet from inside that app. So that's kind of something to be aware of, that these apps not only track you and your kids and GPS wise, but you can go into the app to access the internet. Does that make sense? So that
you need the internet to run the app?
the internet to just, you can just go in and search the internet on there.
And then it wouldn't be like
Trackable.
if you trackable.
Right.
If you went to look at their
Right.
history, it wouldn't show.
Right. It would just show Kick versus.
I don't see Music LY on there, or Musical.ly on there. That's a huge.
And that's something that we all as parents need to be sharing with each other, what's going on. The one that I was a little bit surprised about, I checked in with my young adults that I talked to because I wanted to know, what are they hearing? You know, what are they? And these are kids that are out there living this. I'm in a lot of people's lives, and so I want, you know, there's some that aren't making these choices, and there's some that are so deep that it's scary. And so I talked to them, and one of the big things to be aware of is they're going on Craigslist again. And so they're specifically looking for more than 2 people when they go to Craigslist. So be aware of that as well. Obviously, Snapchat, we've all heard about it. We've all been on there. If you don't know this, they can track you. If you have Snapchat and you put your finger on that person, then if you hold it, it'll show you where they are unless they have their GPS turned off. To me, that's very scary. When we go and we think about social media, we don't realize how much we put out there. For instance, my daughter was a dancer. So I'm out there on social media, woo, go Rockettes, you know. Well, if they have any interest in where my daughter was, then I'm advertising where to go find my kids, really, if you think about it. And that's scary. It is scary. And so make sure when you upload updates on your apps or on your computers, on social media stuff, that you go back into the privacy settings. And also make sure your kids know, and make sure we know, anything that goes out, anything can be tracked back. I remember when my son started law enforcement school, he was up at Alexandria Tech, and they said, if you have anything on social media that's risky, you can go ahead and try to delete it. It'll make you look better if people are searching you, but we buy suitcases of your information, that there's people out there that pull your information, so it could be purchased at any time. And so there's several apps on here that will delete after a short amount of time, like Kick, if they log out and then they log back in, all the histories deleted. And just so you know, they can access this. You can take that phone, but they also can access this from your PS3, your Nintendo, your Apple iPad, or any other technology. If a smart TV, they can get their hands on it, okay? And I would always say that always, like, be random when you check on it. Watch how your kids respond, but we'll get into that a little bit more. So some of these other ones, it just gives you kind of some stuff to think about. Hot or Not was really, really big a couple of years ago, where you're rating people. That's so dangerous. And we're a room full of women here, and we all know what we already do to ourselves. The last thing we need is the world to be doing that. And if you have children that are on social media apps, it's a whole new world and a whole new ball game, because there's a whole new way of showing kids they're left out, to bully, to, I mean, it's a free platform for many. And so what do we do as parents? How do we handle this, and how do we go about it? So there's many more out there on the apps, and I guess really what I wanted to say is this is just an immediate exhaustive list of what is coming up. There is so much that's being done and created and kids are utilizing. This part is going to be really hard to keep up with. If you know your kids are on it, I strongly suggest getting on it and learning everything you can. Absolutely, 100%. And it's really hard. I don't want people to ever, have this be something that impacts them. So if you can't do that because you have other things, then make sure you have somebody else that's doing that as well. This is from Teen Safe, and I'll just pass this around as well. This is just some simple safe guide things that I just want to encourage you with, and it just kind of talks about how the kids are connected, the ways they're connected, and monitoring is mandatory. How many of you guys do monitor what your kids, the best you can, are doing? And how many of you are surprised by what you're learning when you do it? I'll never forget when it was a couple years back and Instagram started and my daughter got on Instagram. And then all of a sudden I go in there and she had quite the following. And I had to pull her aside and be like, excuse me, like you don't know all these people. All these people are keeping tabs on you, and whatever you put out there, is giving them information on you. And kids are so nonchalant. Like privacy, it's not a big deal anymore. And so they're talking to people and they're connecting with people. And one person that I met with, she said that she met this individual through an app, and she just felt like she had to just give in to whatever it was that they were asking for. And so there is this mentality, and our kids are, like I said, I cannot even begin to tell you how much they're learning online. So it's up to us to be able to teach and model something different. So there's a lot more parameters now with law enforcement than we've had in the past, that you can go to them and they've had to create policies and procedures and whatnot. Some of these apps, like Kik, the one I was talking about, that's one of the top ones. When I went in there to prepare for this and just try to go through all the information again, they have information for parents and how you can stay on top of it. And they actually are very helpful tips that they have on there. So I want to encourage you with that. However, Tinder, the other one, is more about teaching individuals on how to protect themselves health-wise and birth control type method or contraceptives. So
what was it
that
you
was
said that we can track or learn more about it?
at Kik. If you go online and you look at their website, they actually have a parent information piece. So I was pleased to see that, at least, that they were caring about us as parents and what our children are looking at and getting into. However, like I said, some of the other ones are not as gracious as to help us stay on top of that. Because a lot of these apps that are on there, they're supposed to be for 18 and older. But a lot of them will state, that they don't monitor it either. So you really, really got to be careful and be aware. If you have their Apple, if they have an Apple, I should say, and you have their iCloud information and password, get in their iTunes, have those passwords. I would not even give my kid their phone back until I have that password. The other thing that I want to encourage you with, and I have it on the back of this one, is talk to your cell phone carriers. These are some of the biggest ones that are on there. Just talk to them. Find out what the parental controls are. I had gotten a phone, my very first phone for my children, when my oldest was 14. And, back then it was still not quite the smartphone. It wasn't smartphones. It was flip phones. It was basic. So it wasn't as stressful when I got that one. Well, then a number of years later, I got one for my younger two, and I went into Verizon, that's where I have my service through, and I talked to them about what the parental controls were, because I was not about to even do this without some kind of parental controls. So I did that, and so I just thought, I'm gonna just see what happens. They got the phones for Christmas, and so I gave it 2 weeks to see how my kids responded. And I cannot even begin to tell you the level of anxiety that went up in my kids within 2 weeks just doubled, if not tripled. I was like, wow. So what I ended up doing then is through the parental controls with Verizon, you can shut off that phone, and do all these things. But in that, if I shut off the phone, then there's certain numbers, up to 20 people, I was able to have pass through. So say I still wanted to get a hold of my kids, but I wanted the phone shut off, then my number would still come through, okay? So I just had it shut off 24 hours a day for a number of years, but only 20 people that I approved could be called through. So that would be my husband and I, my other kids, maybe it was a church leader that they were involved with, and they had a handful of friends they could talk to. And it was insane how awesome. The anxiety just came back down. It was manageable. I had the convenience of my kids having that phone, because it's kind of weird when we think about it. All of us probably didn't have phones. Some of us look a little young, might have, but I'm just like, how did we deal with this? I find it fun to watch old movies, and when they go check their answering machine, it's kind of comical now, but it's just such a different world. So when you really think about it and you get on to talk to your carriers, they have those parameters. There's things like Teen Safe and stuff, and other apps like Covenant Eyes and things like that that you can have installed. This one parent that I was talking about, that their daughter was really, really close to being trafficked. They went into Best Buy, and Best Buy helped them install everything, train them. The Geek Squad did that. So I know that there's other people that are, good with computers and technology. Go to those people, have them look at things, have them help you with things. Your Wi-Fi, you can have passwords on those things. You should be able to have that stuff and access at any time, and utilize being able to talk to your kids and just understand that this stuff is a privilege. We don't own this or owe this to our children. And it's a privilege. And so when you start dating, when you have your kids dating, I'm sure as each and every one of you have looked at things, you can have an amazing kid, and they start dating somebody, and it can change your whole life if it's not somebody that would be good for them and making good choices. I have seen kids that were, 4.0 top-notch kids just get slammed and get involved in drugs and everything else. And it's devastating and it's horrific to watch. So I want to encourage you to make sure that you are utilizing all the abilities and all the things that are there to help you put parameters around that. And I will tell you this, and studies still continue to tell us that the number one influence in a teen's life is their parents. I know it doesn't feel like it. I promise you, I know it doesn't feel like it. I've had that myself. I've had all the fights. I've had everything under the sun. And I want to tell you that when parents fight for their kids and they try to show them that line, the kids know what to come back to then. When I think about, I didn't have a perfect life. I wasn't the perfect teen. I made some really stupid decisions, and I've had many, many consequences. But the day I stopped unemotionalizing my parenting, because I can get really emotional. I take on emotions of others and things like that. And I had to one day decide I need to stop being so emotional when I address my kids and help them understand that when you choose the choice, you choose the consequence. And so, for instance, one of my children, the funnest kid to raise and one of the hardest kids to raise. And I would walk in and I'd be like, why didn't you do blah, 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 blah? And he would be like, where have you been? You said you would be home at, and then so they just have this uncanny way of switching things on you. And next thing you know, we're defending ourselves. And so it's like, it's crazy how that works. And so one day I realized that that's just a diversion because they don't want to hold themselves responsible. So even if you set the parameters of dating, please understand that this isn't between you and your child. This isn't a parent-child conflict. This is a child and their responsibility conflict. So you're the one that's there to set the standards and to say, here's the limits. This is the expectation. Everywhere in life, they're going to have that when they go on the job, if they get in trouble with the law, in school, at home, there's limits. And so we have to set those limits. As parents, it's our job to set those. We don't set those based on anybody else's home, right? So we set them on our morals, our values, and what we think is important. I remember one of my kids saying to me, yeah, I don't know about this God thing. And I said, that's your responsibility. I am doing what I need to do because this is what God called me to be doing. And if you make that decision, then that's your decision. It's not the one I want you to make, and I'm here to help you sort that out. But this is your decision. And in my house, whenever I'd go talk to kids, I would say, even ask my kids when I was in their school, if you choose the choice, they will finish it. You choose the consequence. And so when I started realizing they chose the choice, I made decisions. I live with them today. Mom and dad, they went off, they retired. Okay? So everything I chose, every consequence I've gotten, I still live with today, right? So with my children, they're doing the same thing. Do we all care? Yes. My parents cared about the decisions I made. They cared very, very much. But ultimately, one day, they're the ones that are going to have all the regrets and the forgiveness and the work through everything and all that stuff. So separating yourself and saying, these are your decisions, okay? You are making these decisions. This is what we teach. This is why. And ultimately, this is your decision. When I said that to that child of mine, all of a sudden, they didn't really know what to do. I threw them off guard because they're like, whoa, that's something that's really important to her. And I thought I was going to have a little bit of a battle there, and it was going to be a control. It was going to be a footing on them. And I just said, listen, I'm here for you, but everybody has to make that decision. You can't live on my faith. All I can do is model what faith looks like and why. So I want to encourage you all to make sure that as you're talking to your kids and you're setting these boundaries and these limits and these rules, to understand that everything you're doing is for a purpose. And the more we get emotional, like if my kids are screaming and yelling, and maybe you have kids that use profanity and all that stuff, and our natural reaction is to react to that. And we don't have to. We have that choice to say, don't talk to me like that, and we're going to end this conversation, and you turn around and walk away. You don't have to engage in those fights. It feels like we have to, because one of the battles I had chosen with my kids is respect. That's something that my dad taught me, and I really valued that, and so it was a respect thing. And so when I wasn't respected, I wanted to attend that fight. But when you choose that battle, you got to make sure that you win that battle, and winning the battle isn't feeding it. It's setting the boundary, and it's keeping the boundary. And that's hard. I get it. I've been through the teen stuff. I'm in young adult stuff. It's hard. And they don't always understand. I think my oldest was upset with me because he had a midnight curfew forever. So I'm like, if that's what you're upset about, I'm sorry. But now that you're going into law enforcement, one day you're going to understand why. And it's always that piece where we're always waiting till they, have that prefrontal cortex come together, and then they understand the whys, and then they thank us. Isn't that every mother's dream, is that day when they thank us? Oh, it's coming. And I would have told you, everybody said, and I was one that was an educator that said, your kids want you there. They want you part of things. And I'd say, not my oldest. No, he does not want me there, And where do kids want to be? They want to be, though, where they have no supervision and where they can do the things they want to do. That's the house that they want to be at. And I would also encourage you, know your kids' friends' parents. Know what's going on. There's many times I made phone calls and I learned things that I was like, oh, I'm not okay with that. And so I had to set up new boundaries, new rules. I'm the parent. I'm the one teaching you and talking to you. It wouldn't be beyond me to pull the laws and show my kids what it says, and why. And they think I'm over the top. They do. I'm sure if you talk to all of my kids, they would tell you she's over the top. Oh my gosh. But I'm a communicator, as you can tell. And I want my kids to understand the whys behind things. We're not perfect, but the whys. And when we work through things to get to the next step is what's going to make you better, and it's going to be what makes you stronger, and to understand how God's going to carry us through it all, really. And so it's a big deal, but it's also very hard, because then our kids graduate, and then what happens? If you don't know, they're going to go through, well, why do I believe what I believe? Do I believe it because mom and dad said that's what I believe, or is that really the truth? And then you have all these other people, then you have this freedom, And, I'm in that season of like, now I'm more of a coach and I'm just trying to help them understand how they make this decision and then what that could look like in the future and thinking through the process with them because they don't have the capacity to do that right now. So you want to always be there and be a coach and set the parameters because otherwise somebody else is going to, or it could be too late and they could end up very, very hurt. So, and how do we walk through hard things? What are we doing? What are we modeling? How are we going about it? Because how we do it is going to be the biggest model to what our kids have going on. So, okay. For the guide to consequences, there's punishment and then there's consequences. And so we have to be very, very careful because sometimes I think a punishment comes out of the emotion. You're grounded for a week and no cell phones for the next year. And, we can, I'm really good at dishing out that stuff. So, but we have to be very, very careful. And so what I learned, and this was a program that I had gotten actually off of 92.9 at once. They had an advertisement, but it's been many years. But what I learned was to attach what I want, because phones and video games are great currency for parents. No time like this have we ever had something that was so important to our kids, right? So with that, you set everything. When they say, Mom, can I? Then you start thinking, what would I like to have done or see happen? And so I'll be like, sure, as soon as you get done with your homework, as soon as you get the dishwasher emptied, as soon as and yeah, they're going to buck you. They're going to be like, no, it's stupid. I got to get together with them in an hour. Well, then I guess you better hurry up, And ever since I started tuning in, when they say, Mom, can I? The next thing I'm thinking is, what would I like to have done or see happen? And so then they are motivated. So it's a great motivator. And when you think about this too, when you're thinking about consequences for your children, what do you hope to have out of the end? A changed behavior, isn't it? But a lot of times when we start dishing out really severe punishment, or we meet our kids in that anger and the outbursts and all that stuff, it just creates bitterness. And we don't want to belittle our kids. We want them to feel like they're empowered to make different decisions. So we have to give them the opportunity to meet the task or to do better in order to be able to receive what they would like to have. So even sometimes if you say, okay, well, if you're going to use profanity, how about for the next 3 hours, I'll have your phone until you cannot do that for 3 hours. And even starting it with small increments and just giving them something to work towards and telling them how to get it back. Because we cannot punish kids into being good kids. It's just going to make them want to do more to make us, to get more control over us and that kind of thing. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. I don't know what time it is. Let's see.
12:32.
Okay, great. So this is just a little bit of guide on teaching them to also right the wrong. So if they're doing something, don't just make them pay time. What do they do to make it right? It's something if their brother had to set the table because they were sloughing off not doing what they need to do, well, maybe they need to do their brother's chores for whatever, and just being able to take small incremental steps in holding kids accountable for their actions. And so I just want to encourage you, and that's just a little bit there. Now, I'll start passing this out while we do this too, so I can explain to you what that is. I think every family needs to decide what's okay for the dating scene. And when you make that decision of what's okay, you have to understand this is going to project into the technological world, if you know what I mean. So they're going to be talking to whoever and whatever. And most kids that I've experienced with my teenagers and their friends through the high school years, most of them are using Snapchat to do that. It used to be where you could go into their text and and you could do all that stuff. But most of them are using stuff that does disappear. And I don't know if you're like me, if I Snapchat my kids, by the time I open it up, I don't remember what it said. So I really don't know what they're even replying to, because it doesn't have any of the before and after, you know? And Snapchat keeps all of that information, and kids need to know that they think it's just gone, but it's not. So every single family has to decide. And, you know, my parents did this thing. It was called When You're 16, You Can Date. And there's a lot of people that do that. And I never had an age that my kids could date. And I remember one time, my son, my middle one, was 17, and I was at the youth group, and I'm standing there, and he's talking to somebody. They were another leader, and they asked him if he had a girlfriend, and he said, "No, I don't have a girlfriend." And he goes, "Mom, you're so lucky I don't have a girlfriend." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I'm 17 and I don't have a girlfriend." And I said, "No, you're lucky you don't have a girlfriend." And he's like, "Why am I lucky?" And I said, "Because you're the one that doesn't have to deal with it. What do I care if you have a girlfriend or not?" And he goes, "Well, you said I couldn't date till I was 17. I said, "No, that is not what I said. What I said was there was no point in dating until you're 17, because if you date somebody for a year, then you'd be 18 and you can make the decision on if it's going anywhere else." I said, "So what's the point on dating before that?" And he was like, "Oh, well, that's true. That was kind of smart on your part." And I'm like, it's not a matter of being smart. It's a matter of saying, why am I dating? What's the purpose of my dating? If you don't understand why you're dating, because if you're dating to get your value from somebody, well, then you need to reconsider why you're dating, right? I don't advocate getting your value from other people. There's only one place you should get your value, and so I want to teach you what is your value in that. And so with your kids, understand what is their love language. If you don't know their love language, then look it up. They have it, free tests all over online. Figure out your kids' love language. It's a huge, huge benefit to all of us to know our kids' love language. It's Gary Smalley does the 5 love languages. It's online. You can do it for your coworkers, family, whatever. Know people's love languages. Know how to fill their cup so they don't go looking for it everywhere else to go fill their cup. That's one thing I would do. The other thing I would do is their temperaments. There's many different temperaments out there. There's the disc, they have the animals. If you've heard it, there's like the otter, the beaver, the lion, and the golden retriever. They do it by colors. There's many, many things. Know their temperament, know their wiring. I'm not trying to put people in a box, but I do want to understand what is their process of thinking. Why do they think that way? How do I meet those needs? And so look up the temperaments. There's many different ones out there, and if you need that information, contact me at Birthline. I will get you the information on where to do this or give you a sample test. The next thing I would do is help them figure out what is their gifts. What's their spiritual gifts? How are they wired, you know, with their spiritual gifts? Like, I'll never forget when I was in my early 20s and I was trying to figure out like who I was and what I believe and why I believe it. And I was in a women's Bible study, and I had this woman do the spiritual gifts, and I learned that mine was exhortation, and I'm like, I don't even know what that word is. And so she had told me what the word was, and then she said, now that you know what your gift is, now you need to go develop it. What? I have to develop something? Like, I have to work towards this? And then when you start developing those gifts that you have, and you start understanding your wiring, that irons can sharpen irons then. You know, so when I, you know, as director, I know what I am not good at, and I know where my challenges are, and I grab my team and I say, I need you here and I need you here. It empowers us to be the body. It empowers us to be iron sharpening irons. And so the more I understand who I am, then I can understand the purpose I have in this world and why I'm here, right? And so we are the most fulfilled when we are operating in that. Not that I don't have to still do accounting and things like that. It's not an excuse not to do certain things. It's something that we have to work harder at and sharpen ourselves more, but it also helps me to know where to plug others into that. People that are accounting brained, I keep them close. I need them more than anything. I need people like that in my life. So that's something else I do. So those are things that I would make sure that I would understand with my kids, and I would teach them who they are and empower them, because we all know that there's way more wolves in sheep's clothing now. And we really have to be proactive in talking to our kids I'm not sure about the age group here, but the younger you can start being up at night and making sure you're there to talk to your kids, the better. If you don't have that opportunity and you have teens that you're having a hard time talking to, you got to get them in a car and you got to just drive. Somehow, some way, you have something to do that's a couple hours away, and you got to get in the car because they can't go anywhere. The phone's not on. No phone. And you talk and you just be there and you be present with them. And if you have a child that doesn't want to talk, then you just stay present, drive longer. But the other thing, another little trick I did, which they'll now know because I think they're putting this on the website, is I would get them in the car, and if they wouldn't listen, I would call my girlfriend, and she just knew that when I started talking and I made no sense at all, and I was telling her stories and speaking to the story, they're listening. They all want a juicy story, even if it's not a real one, okay? Like, I'm not saying fib, I'm not saying that. But like, you heard of one at some point, and you didn't, it could be one I told you, I don't know. But give your thoughts and whatever it is and just have them listen, because that child is listening. They're paying attention to a story you're telling a friend on the phone because it's not directed at them. It's just kind of weird, but crazy. But that was one of my tricks for one of my kids who they didn't want to hear it. I remember they said, like, when do you start talking to your kids about things like sex and stuff? And I was told when they ask questions. He never asked questions. Next thing I know, I got a 12 and 13-year-old. I'm like, I've never started the conversation. As where my other two, I was always out in the schools, so I was young. They knew that they could talk to me about this stuff, and they knew I was talking to other kids about this stuff. And so pay attention to, hey, how are we going to introduce this? What are we going to do? There's amazing resources out there. So this assessing your assets, one of the reasons I have this through, I'm certified through the Center for Relationship Education. They have a curriculum that we teach from. And but one of the reasons I gave you this side is it has on here the Search Institute in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is kind of cool that they're here. But if you go to this website for the Search Institute, they have a lot of really good information for parents and for educators or people like that is just like on kids and what they need and what they're doing, and they have more information of what's on the back here. But I just printed you assessing your assets, and this is something that this curriculum will do in the classrooms, is everybody has 20 external assets and then 20 internal assets. And I do have a forum that's for parents that are ideas on what to do. So if you would like that, go ahead and call me, email me, whatever, and I can email that out to you. But if you also would like to, you can just go on the Search Institute. It's on there as well. So, but they say for your kids to have success in life, that they should have some assets on here. And you would be amazed when our clients come into Birthline. We have all walks of life. And those kids who come in that have a parent that's stable, at least one, it's better if they're married or remarried and that home is stable, those kids are going to make it. And when I say stable, I mean that they're working, they're doing the best they can, living by, their morals and values, and they're trying, they'll be there to support them, they'll be there to help them, whether they're helping with daycare or whatever. Those kids, I know, even though they're going through a really hard time, they're going to come out the other side, and they're going to be able to get through a college program or things like that. Like, if you think about it, some of the basic things that were trades, you need an education for now. You just do. And it's just kind of a crazy deal because technology. So, but I want you to know, when those kids, if they have at least one stable parent and that can help them, then they're going to make it. But a lot of times, if I have parents that are struggling themselves with addictions, with jobs, and in and out of places, those are the kids that are going to have to make a decision on whether or not to fight and to come through, or they're going to be the ones that are going to just keep recreating. And so it's really hard when they don't have somebody that can just help them get through a school program. I almost feel like we need fostering families to help some of these people get through it, because if somebody would just help them with that baby so that they could, get there, then it's going to be a lot more successful. So I'm going to buy a big house and y'all can come and help me out, and I'm going to I have all these IKEA rooms set up, and no, I would love to do that. I'd love to be able to help them more. So, but this I wanted to make sure you got so that you can kind of look at, what do your kids look like? Do they have these assets? What do the assets look like? And I hope that all of you have the support of your church and with your youth group and whatnot, because I honestly don't know how I would have got through without that myself, and having youth leaders come alongside me. They don't raise our children for us, but they definitely are there for support. So it's been really cool. So I think we have a few minutes left. One thing I should probably tell you before we do question and answer stuff is Birthline is bringing Fight the New Drug. If you guys are not aware of this, it's a website, it's on pornography, and they go out and they do presentations. It's very good. And so we're going to be bringing them on April 10th and 11th, and they're going to come. We're going to do a morning presentation at the Waters on the 11th, and that's a church out in Sartell, and then an evening one. So if you can get one or the other, this will give you some really good information, because the statistics on that is really hard. It's difficult. So so I want to give time for questions and answers. So does anybody have any thoughts they want to share or questions on the things we talked about? Does anybody have any apps that they have had experiences with that they had to do some follow-up or get help with, or things they want to share with each other to watch out for? Like, what was the one that you mentioned? It was Music
Music.ly.
Music.ly. Okay.
But
what do they do on there?
They make little music videos. Okay, they're not music videos.
No?
That's what it's supposed to be. Yeah, it's very much pornography is it's been corrupted. It may have been started off to be an innocent one with
Yeah, so Music.ly is supposed to be creating music videos, and I'm repeating this for the thing, but they're using it and corrupting it and making videos that are not at all what they should be making videos about. On that paper that I gave you that has the apps, on the way bottom, there's these vaults. I had no idea these vaults, it's called Vaulty on there. I think it's on the back, on the way back. The Vaulty or other vaults. Hide Pro is one. They look like, one time my daughter, she goes, do you want to see where I hid my prom dress pictures so that her date didn't see them? And I'm like, sure, And so she goes into what looks like a calculator, our calculator on the phone. She punches in a code and it opens up this whole other screen that has all her hidden pictures in there. And I'm sitting there going, and she's a great girl and I would never think anything of that stuff, but yet I'm like, okay, I don't think parents are aware of this one, so I put that on there, that there's Vaulty, and then there's Hide It Pro, and there's others. So if you go into the app area of your phone and you have search, put vaults, you'll get everything. If you put teens and dating, you'll get all the ones, and you can see which ones have the most stars and see what people are using the most and stay up to date that way. The other thing that, with you saying that about the Music.ly, I wanted to bring is this iDosing. It's an MP3, it's music, and supposedly they put together this music in such a way where it has one tone here and one tone here, and it's supposed to give you the feeling of being on drugs or something. And so these kids, it's a newer thing. So that's the other thing that we could all get into. I know this is on teens and technology, but when it comes to what our kids are getting into, it's nothing like what I have ever dealt with when I was growing up in any way, shape, or form. They're very loose about what they're putting in their bodies, and the experiences and how they're reacting. And unfortunately, some of this with the way we're trying to be as if, you know, you can just have sex and it's not a big deal and there's no emotion attached, and then they're going online and they're seeing things, and then we have movies like 50 Shades of Grey, which I've never watched them. I don't ever want to watch them. I know enough about them, and I've been in the schools when the kids are talking about them, and I get angry. I get really, really angry because that makes it seem like that's good. That's not good. That's not how it was ever intended, and our youth are being robbed of how it was intended. Families are being broken. The hookup culture is creating a whole new thing. We have more babies born to single parent homes than we have ever had, and saying that, you know, we'll just give long acting, you know, birth control to them, it's not helping us. It's not helping us, and I could go off on a whole other tangent on that if you'd like. I'd be more than happy to. But seriously, you guys, what we're teaching our kids with relationships and with our bodies, if you go out and you look at the CDC for the national stats, like HIV is on the rise, syphilis is back, you know, you can put contraceptives in people, and yeah, you can, but it's not going to help anybody's heart. It's not going to help them want to have a family one day. It's not going to help them in so many ways emotionally. It's really something that we as parents have to just take control and have our boundaries and plug in. Jessica.
Oh, I was just going to say, she was talking about that Musical.ly app or whatever, and I had just screenshotted from a story that Cara Levin just did about it. So they were talking about how there's like code words, and then it's not just like sex stuff, it's promoting anorexia, suicide, and self-harm. This one dad, the sex traffickers are going through these apps to get to our kids and stuff like that. But then they were saying that the kids know to keep changing the code words to skirt the app creators. So how do you even, I mean, do you have any suggestions for, I feel like it's almost impossible to keep up with it and to...
I would agree, it is almost impossible to keep up with. Absolutely it is. It's kind of the same thing like with the, I'm trying to recall the name of it now. It was in the smoke shops that the kids were smoking, and it keeps getting banned. Kids keep, K2? Yeah, the K2 was one of the terms for that. But that is our reality as a parent, is they are switching things up, they're changing it, and they're constantly moving it forward and doing something new or different. That's why this isn't even an exhaustive list of apps, that we are in a battle all around for that. And so doing Care 11 type things, that's great, it brings awareness, but that's where I'm saying we as parents have got to toe the line. We have to come together, we have to work through things, we have to stop attacking. Don't let the whole divide and conquer things. Whether you're married or divorced, it doesn't matter. It's vital that the parents parent the kids together. And we have to be talking to them. We have to be living a life that they will be able to then, mimic and know how to come back to. It's scary, it's hard, but they're going to keep doing this. As long as our government and, everything else keeps doing this, they're going to keep doing this. I know one girl, her mom, met somebody online, and so then that's where they went to live, and it didn't end up well, and eventually she ended up getting stuck in sex trafficking and stuff. And so it's like in St. Cloud here, we have to understand I've heard this is the training ground for it. And I will tell you that I've met more people than I would like to that have been sex trafficked. And it's devastating. We have the Terebinth that's coming in. And again, the Sexual Assault Center is amazing at helping try to stop this and get this taken care of. It's very, very difficult. And that's what I mean. We can feel very defeated. We can, as individuals, we can feel very, very defeated, and it's scary. And so that's why it's vitally important that we as parents are parenting, and that we have to try to take out the emotion, even though this is stuff that's have you ever lost your kids for any short amount of time? And then by the time you saw them, you were like, where were you? And you're just like Your like stress is through the roof, you know, and so you're like tweaking out and they're like, I didn't even know I was missing, you know, and you're like over the top, you know. When we want to protect our kids, it brings that out. And we're all women here, and I know the mother bear feeling. I am the first to run to that, you know, and it's hard and they don't understand. And so that's why I say it's so important to band together, know where your kids are. And then, you know, I was in an abusive relationship when I was a teenager, and I had my dad to be that barrier. That's when the phone was connected to the wall. You know, I had that. And these kids have these apps and they can be tracked and they're looking at each other's stuff and, you know, and so it's so important that we're modeling and teaching and there and talking and talking and talking and talking. And it's also probably one of the biggest things is we need our dads to step in because God wired them specifically, you know. They can shut it off. I don't know how emotional you guys get or not, but I get very emotional and then I think I'm trying to be like, and then I'm like, you know, okay, and then, you know, and guys can be like, no, you're grounded, you're done, it's whatever, and I'm like, we're like walking around with this guilt feeling, you know, we can't guilt parents either, we can't be their friends, and I told my kids, one of them said, I can't wait till I'm older and we can be best friends. I said, I'm not going to be your best friend, I'm sorry. I will always be your mom. I'm always going to nag you. I'm always going to tell you what you need to be doing. I would love to be your best friend. You could share anything with me. You can trust me. But there's nothing that's ever going to make me stop wanting to protect you. It just isn't going to happen. And so it's hard. I have a grown mother. I'm grown. I've dealt with sick kids my whole life. She still tells me how to take care of myself when I'm sick. You know, you just can't take the mom out of the mom. But no, yeah, that's what we're up against.
One of the other tips that they shared in the article was no matter who your phone provider is, everybody has like a cloud or the iPod or whatever, and you can see what apps they're uploading. So
Yep.
they're doing like what you said, where
Yep.
they delete them before the phone is checked or whatever.
Then you can go back and see.
the activity on there. So I always made sure that I was watching with my kids, even who they were calling and all that.
iCloud and iTunes right now, you have to have the passwords. And if they change those passwords, to me, that's just dead ringer. You're guilty. Shut the phone down. You know, and that's where it was nice with like Verizon, what I said. I could shut the phone down, but then my phone number can still get through. Does that make sense? So we have to just be okay with it. And our kids aren't going to respond like, thanks, Mom, today. You know, but one day. And I don't want us to operate out of fear either, because I think we can. We get very stressed. We get scared for our kids. And, you know, we have the one on our side that's going to help us through this. And, yeah. Is it cool if we just end by praying? Is that cool? Let me pray for you guys. Father, I just thank you, Lord, for what you've done on the cross for us. Father Jesus, without you, there would be no hope for tomorrow. And Father, I just pray over each and every single family represented here and those who may be watching online, Father God. I just pray that you would step in a real and mighty way, Father God, that you would intervene in any situation that needs your time and attention and your personal touch, your divine touch, Lord. I just pray a covering over each and every person, Lord, over their children, over their parenting, Father God, that as we do search our own hearts and what you have for us and what you're calling us to, Lord, that you would give us the strength and the wisdom and to guide us through this process of raising our children and for them to know you ultimately, Father God. Let them see your light through us, Father God. Let them understand that your love is unconditional. Let them know without a shadow of a doubt that you're not a fun killer, Lord, that you're a life giver. Father, let them just be able to embrace the idea of what you've done on the cross for us, especially as we celebrate the Easter season, Father God. Let us be able to open our hearts and our minds to everything you have for us, whether it be our spiritual gift or how you've wired us or our families or the relationships. Lord, help us turn our mess into a message that brings you glory, Father God. And I just ask that you would just give each and every single one of us that peace, whatever the peace it is, the nugget that we can take away that can turn the course of a child's life, even if it's not just our own, Father God, that we would be there for others and be able to raise our children together and to understand and to band together and be open and just help one another out, even if it's just for prayer, Father God. Lord, I just ask that you would walk in a real mighty way in every single one of their circumstances. In your precious and mighty name, amen.
Spirit 92.9